All right, so get ready because today we're going deep into a world that just might make you kind of question, well, reality itself.
Oh, sounds intense.
It is. We're
Yeah.
tackling targeted individuals,
Okay.
people who truly believe they are being harassed and watched, but like secretly.
Mm.
And we've got a source, an actual recording from someone who claims to be living this experience, telling us what it's like.
Wow, a first-hand account.
Yeah, and it gets even wilder. This person says they experience, get this, artificial telepathy.
Hmm.
Basically, there's a constant, inescapable broadcast playing in their mind.
Like they can't turn it off.
They say it's impossible to ignore.
Yeah.
Like someone's forcing them to wear headphones, blasting something awful nonstop.
That feeling of intrusion, I mean, a lot of people can relate to that in some way.
Oh, yeah.
Intrusive thoughts, anxieties. But this person, it sounds way more intense, persistent.
For sure. They described it as constant mental pressure.
So then we have to ask, from a psychology standpoint, could this be auditory hallucinations?
Possible.
Or maybe the extreme stress they're under is just twisting their perception, making normal thoughts feel external, amplified.
Like their brain is tricking them.
Could be.
They even say to cope, they try to distract themselves, keep busy, and the voices fade a little.
Oh, interesting. That's actually similar to some therapeutic techniques for managing those kinds of thoughts.
Really?
You focus outward to shift your attention away from the internal distress. Makes sense.
But there's more. This person, they're really focused on documenting everything.
Documenting?
Every single detail.
Yeah.
Especially when those voices turn threatening. And there's this one chilling part. They describe a perceived attacker saying, "It ain't gonna kill you. No time soon, but it sure is fun watching you in pain."
Oh, wow. That's dark. And it tells us a bit about the psychology here, right? Why document everything?
Yeah.
Validation, fear, trying to build a case against the attackers? Who knows? But it shows how perceived threats can feel even stronger than real ones, especially when you think there's this, sadistic enjoyment behind it.
Yeah, they're convinced they're being targeted on purpose. They even go so far as to say their ex-girlfriend is involved, accusing her of some pretty disturbing things.
Now that adds a layer of complexity.
It does.
I mean, heartbreak, betrayal, we all know that pain. It can warp how we see things. But this person claims they actually see these things happening.
See them.
Yeah, and they blame it on EMF.
Right, EMF, those invisible waves all around us, they think those are somehow broadcasting these visions.
Like a personal spy network feeding them live footage. Yeah.
They even talk about using, curved glass, prisms, as if they're building some EMF receiver to tune into a secret frequency.
Fascinating, but scientifically, EMF transmitting actual images of people like that, we're pretty far off from that being a reality.
So then, what is going on here?
Well, maybe it's pareidolia. That's our brains finding patterns where there are none.
Like seeing faces in the cloud.
Exactly. You're primed to believe something, and then boom, random distortions become proof, especially if you're already anxious.
So it's not intentional lying, but perception skewed by belief and how their brain works.
Exactly. It makes this whole targeted individual thing pretty complex, right?
For sure. And to make things even more complicated, they insist they aren't mentally ill. They say they're successful, stable, and they are telling the full truth, the real truth.
Which is why we need nuance here. Someone can be high-functioning and still experience delusions. It's not one or the other.
Right. So we know they believe they're being targeted, and EMF is the weapon. But how does it all supposedly work? What's the mechanism? Give me the details.
All right, well, that's where things get even more interesting. In the next part of our deep dive, we'll break down exactly how they believe these EMF broadcasts work, what tech is involved, and the role they claim their ex-girlfriend is playing. It's wild, trust me. So EMF broadcasts, right? They think it's a tool for, surveillance and harassment. This person says they can actually see what's happening elsewhere through these broadcasts, but only under certain conditions.
Yeah, it's like their own personal spy network, beaming live feeds straight to their mind.
Exactly. And get this, they use curved glass, crystals, even prisms.
Like they're building their own EMF receiver.
Yeah, to see these broadcasts better.
And this is where the washing machine comes in, right?
The washing machine?
Yeah, they specifically say they use the curved glass on their washing machine to see these things. It's a kind of strange image.
Definitely a bit out there, but it might show how they're thinking. Our brains, especially when stressed, they love finding patterns, even when there are none.
So they already think they're being targeted, and then some random distortion or reflection, maybe from the light hitting that curved glass, boom, proof.
It's like their brain is connecting dots that aren't even there, filling in the blanks to fit their belief.
Now, they also claim to have seen their ex-girlfriend, doing things, sexual things, with other people through these EMF visualizations, they say.
That's a heavy detail. It brings up a whole other level psychologically. Heartbreak, betrayal, maybe even revenge, all those emotions, they can distort how we see things.
It's interesting because they separate these live broadcasts from what they call EMF holograms. They even mention having a video of an EMF hologram in a tree.
Oh, wow. A video.
Yeah.
So they've got this whole internal logic built around this, even if it doesn't line up with, well, science. Like they're creating a system to explain these bizarre experiences.
Okay, so if we're looking at this, skeptically, are there other explanations? Are we talking hallucinations, that pareidolia thing again?
It's tough to say with a real evaluation, but it's probably a mix of things. Stress, anxiety, lack of sleep, all that can mess with your perception, make you misinterpret things.
And then there's the internet, those online communities, the targeted individual groups. Those can help.
Oh, for sure. They offer a sense of belonging when someone feels isolated, but they can also become echo chambers where misinformation thrives.
Like a feedback loop. The more they're in those groups, the more their beliefs get stronger, and any little thing becomes proof.
Exactly. And remember, this person is adamant, totally convinced they are not mentally ill, successful, stable, telling the truth. That's what they say.
Which makes it even more important to, approach this carefully. It's not about dismissing them, but understanding what might be contributing to these beliefs. So we've got what they think is happening, some possible reasons why they think that way. But who's behind it all? Who are they blaming?
That's where it gets a little darker. It's not just some vague idea of being targeted. They have specific people in mind.
Okay, so who are these supposed perpetrators? What's their evidence?
The main one, their ex-girlfriend. They are convinced she's behind it, orchestrating these EMF broadcasts, using them to torment them.
And it's not just vague accusations, right?
Oh, no. They go into really specific graphic details, all based on what they saw through these broadcasts. It's disturbing.
It is. And that's where reality and delusion get even harder to separate. You've got intense emotions, heartbreak, anger, on top of this belief system that justifies any interpretation, no matter how extreme. It's like this whole narrative where the ex-girlfriend is the villain and EMF is her weapon.
And it goes beyond just her. They mention someone named Marcus and his brother as being involved in these attacks.
Oh, right. And that chilling line, "It ain't gonna kill you, no time soon, but it sure is fun watching you in pain." They claim that came from Marcus's older brother.
It's disturbing on so many levels, not just what it says, but that they really believe these people are enjoying their pain, that it's all intentional.
Like those perceived threats we talked about, they just get amplified.
Exactly. When we feel threatened, our brain goes into overdrive and suddenly every coincidence, every little thing seems hostile, planned.
So we've got someone who thinks they're being targeted by this group using high tech to mess with their reality. They feel validated by their own interpretations and by these online communities. It's a lot to process.
It is, and it makes us think about how to address these beliefs, how to help without encouraging harmful ideas. How do we deal with this whole mess of technology, belief, and what's real in this day and age? It's complicated.
Well, that brings us to the final part of this deep dive.
Okay.
We've seen what this person believes, why they might believe it, all that. But what does it all mean in the bigger picture? What can we learn from this about ourselves, technology, and how we handle information and belief in the 21st century? Let's get into that.
All right, so this is it, the final part of our deep dive. We've gone through a lot, EMF manipulation, the psychology, those online communities. It's been a wild ride.
For sure. A real look into how technology and perception collide,
Yeah.
And how we try to figure out what's real.
Yeah. So in this last part, I kind of want to zoom out. Think about the bigger picture. This targeted individual phenomenon, what's it telling us about technology and how we relate to it in this digital world? That's a big question. And honestly, it goes way beyond this one case. We're in this age where tech can be amazing, but also, well, kind of scary. It connects us, but it also opens doors for surveillance, misinformation, all that.
It's like a two-sided coin, right?
Yeah.
So much info at our fingertips. But we can also get stuck in these bubbles where our beliefs, even if they're not true, just get stronger.
Exactly. And then add in those real fears about privacy, data security, big tech getting too powerful. It's no wonder people feel uneasy, even paranoid sometimes.
So how do we deal with this? How do we use technology without getting sucked into fear and those unfounded beliefs? How do we stay grounded,
Well, got to start with critical thinking, question everything, Look at where your info's coming from. Be open to other viewpoints.
So take a step back and ask, is this source reliable? What biases are there? Is there another way to see this? Like, we need to be skeptical, especially online.
Oh, absolutely. And don't forget our own biases. We all have them. They can really shape how we see things, especially when it's something emotional.
Because emotions can cloud our judgment. When we're scared or anxious, it's easier to jump to conclusions, see patterns that aren't there.
For sure. So we got to be aware of that, how our feelings might be playing into things.
What about, like, media literacy?
Yeah.
Seems important, too. Knowing what's a good source and what's not, understanding algorithms, how they target us, all that.
Super important. Got to have those tools to, analyze the information we see, make smart choices online. Like building up your defenses against all the misinformation and manipulation out there.
Yeah, like a digital immune system. Okay, so what about just talking to each other?
Yeah.
Open conversation. How do we do that as a society when these beliefs, even if they're based on fear or bad information, are so strongly held?
That's where empathy comes in. Really listening to each other. Even if you don't agree with someone, you can still understand where they're coming from.
Because most people, they aren't trying to be malicious. They're just trying to find answers, to understand a world that feels more and more chaotic.
Right. And if we're curious, respectful, maybe we can have real conversations, find some common ground.
So wrapping this up, I think we've learned a lot more than just about EMF and targeted individuals. This whole thing has shown us how technology, psychology, and truth are all tangled up, especially in the digital age.
Definitely. It's a reminder to be careful, think critically, be aware of our own biases, and talk to each other. Really talk. How we handle all this is going to shape what our digital world looks like.
Yeah. And that's where we leave you. In a world where what's real and what we perceive are getting blurrier and blurrier, how are you going to engage with tech and information? How will you make sure you're not just absorbing it all, but actually thinking critically about what's shaping your view of the world? That's something to think about.